Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. He's Ricardo Martinez-Paz. We have Steelers and Eagles football to talk with you. A lot of stuff's happening in the NFL right now. Every team seems to be out there kind of finalizing their roster before the new league year starts, and obviously free agency starts with that. So we have a big free agency preview episode for you. I'm pretty amped up for it. It's that time of the year where after the Super Bowl, you've kind of had a little bit of a break, but now all of a sudden it's back into full swing, and that starts really next week. The new league year starts and free agency begins. So exciting times, and we're here to kind of preview it a little bit. But before we do that, Ricardo, I ask you, how you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to be talking, free agents, possible targets, all the rumors. And I mean, dude, it doesn't get better than this in the offseason. It's like free agency and the draft. Those are the two biggest things. So, yeah, dude, I'm excited. How are you doing though?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited for it as well. And yeah, I'm just super kind of amped up to see. I mean, this is sort of like the start of the hope for a lot of teams of what's sort of the excitement of that next move. So, I think the thing we kind of talked about this yesterday. I think the thing that we can kind of talk about first, especially with the Eagles, because they made a move yesterday, and obviously there's the Kevin Byard update. But I think just if we kind of go over sort of where the rosters are both at, first and foremost, with the most recent kind of cap casualties, and anybody else we could see being a cap casualty, maybe the place to start before we dive into who else is free agents right now.
Yeah, let's do that. Straight into it, man.
Sounds good. So, I mean, with the Steelers, they made the couple moves earlier in the I guess it was about a week or two ago. They made the moves of cutting Mason Cole. Don't have all the names off the top of my head here, which I should have. That's on me. They cut Mason Cole. They cut Chukwuma Okorafor, and they cut Mitchell Trubisky. Were the three that I believe they kind of cut ties with as cap casualties. I don't know if we talked about that in our last episode. None of that was super surprising necessarily, but just some fat trimmed down the roster. I could see one or two more guys being potential cap casualties if you want me to give those to you. But overall, those were the three I kind of expected. The other one I forgot to was Presley Harvin. He was also cut. But yeah, nothing that kind of shocked me and nothing that I was upset about per se.
Yeah, I mean, that's Mason Cole, definitely the biggest. I mean, out of all of them, and you could argue Chuks Okorafor, but Mason Cole, I mean, just after the season before where it looked like he was solid, and then he just took a step down, step back, and I mean, at points of the season couldn't snap the ball properly. So it was it made sense from a performance standpoint and from a cap standpoint too. But
it was time to move on, and I feel like we talked about that a little bit of like throughout the season, things just weren't going well, and it was like, all right, they really need an upgrade here, and now that becomes very apparent as they don't really have a true center on their roster at this point. Chukwuma Okorafor, I'm happy with it because they wanted to move on from him, and they made that apparent when they benched him for Broderick Jones.
Right.
For a tackle in this league, how rare they are, I'm surprised they couldn't get even just like a 6th or a 7th round pick. But I mean, that's neither here nor there at this point. I guess as far as other cap casualties could go, the big name that was kind of circulated a little bit to potentially go and didn't was Patrick Peterson. I don't think that he's going to go at this point. His cap hit is a little over just under 10 million for next season. But honestly, I think he provides such a veteran presence, and he showed some versatility playing safety at times for the team last year. And I think that he did a lot in helping Joey Porter come along. And if they bring in another young corner this offseason, I think they're going to want kind of his veteran presence there. So I'd be surprised if he kind of went. The other person that I do fully kind of expect to get cut at some point here is Allen Robinson. I mean, he's owed just under 12 million. Not really productive last year. And now with Arthur Smith's system, he doesn't really use slot receivers that much. So that much for a guy who's really on the back end of his career, I think that it's very likely that he's going to get cut. So he's kind of the one other guy I really kind of see going at this point as far as being a cap casualty. anything other than that, I mean, I've heard rumblings about DeMonte Casey, but I don't think it would really save them that much. I mean,
Yeah.
he's making only 3.8 million next season. That's really not a lot in the grand scheme of things. I mean, he's making less than like he's making less than a Landon Roberts and Nate Herbig. So that kind of puts it in perspective there. He's really not making a ton, but I guess it's production versus salary at that point. So Allen Robinson's really the one other guy I could see going.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's probably the most obvious one. I don't know. Do you think there's a chance Larry Ogunjobi could, considering he hasn't been living up to the contract he was given a couple years ago?
He's a tough one. I could see it happening. I'm glad you brought that up. I feel like it's going to be tough because I think his cap, like the cap hit of cutting him, would still be pretty significant. I think it honestly depends what the Steelers do in free agency and the draft. As far
Yeah,
as I don't think he's someone that they're going to cut to free up salary for free agency, but I think he's someone that if they are getting towards the end of free agency and gearing up for the draft or early, not even. I think I could see him breaking camp and being someone that just doesn't make the roster because it would save them money.
I was gonna say
But
because I think if you designate him as a post June 1st cut, you
uh-huh.
would you would save more money than like cutting him now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
So I think it's gonna be something where it's like I'm not expecting it now, but down the line I could see him being another cap casualty because he hasn't lived up to that contract.
yeah, I mean, well, what was it, like 3 years, 39 million or something like that? I can't remember the exact 42. It was something at least double figures for
Yeah,
him. But
it was definitely 3 million. So I don't remember what the let me see if I because I might have it up right here.
oh, it was 3 years, 28.75 mil. That's
There
what it
you go.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So I mean, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's the sixth highest. He's got the sixth highest cap hit of anybody on the roster. Allen Robinson is seventh to put that in perspective. So
yeah,
I could see him going. But outside of that, yeah, I don't really see anybody else potentially being on the way out with as far as cap casualties.
yeah. Fair enough.
Um, I guess I can I'll go through the Steelers free agents that they have
Yeah,
right now, and then we can kind of shift over and do that for the Eagles, and then after that we can kind of circle back around and do potential positions and free agent targets. But
yeah. All
um,
right.
as
Cool.
far as Steelers free agents go, I mean, there's a clear cut. The Steelers are kind of fortunate this year in that they have some cap space, but they also don't really have a lot of high end free agents they have to worry about re-signing. I mean, really, the most
Yeah,
important guy for them to re-sign, point blank, is Mason Rudolph. And after that, I feel like it's a pretty dramatic drop down to step two. And I guess this can kind of feed into the conversation of the quarterback position because there's been rumblings that the Steelers aren't really interested in any of the potential quarterbacks that would be available this offseason, whether it's free agency and Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson or Baker Mayfield or trading for a Justin Fields. It doesn't sound like they're interested from the reports we've heard. Now, this could be, it could be a little bit of smoke. It could be, we don't want to show all of our cards, but it could
yeah,
be just, hey, we have Kenny Pickett. We want to just, put as much confidence into him before we decide to make a move. But, I think I said this in our last episode. To me, it feels like Mason Rudolph is the guy, to be competition for Kenny Pickett. And, if it's not him, I don't really know if there's going to be a true competition. So he is, for me, for sure, the number one and really the only free agent I really want back.
yeah. He clearly has to be, especially with the players. I mean, handful of them wanting him back, and maybe divided on who they want starting, but it's still clearly showed enough filling in for Pickett at the end of the season when they made that. I mean, the racked up a few wins and then in the postseason lost, but they still put in a valiant effort. But still, I mean, you know what you have with them too, so it's not if you go out and get someone else. Not to say you don't know what you have with them, but you're taking it's a different system and obviously a different organization. And so, and Rudolph has obviously been there for a long time, his whole career. So he's already familiar with the ins and out of how the organization's run. So
Yeah, and I think Pittsburgh wants him back, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Like if Pittsburgh
yeah,
wants him back, I have faith that this front office is going to get it done. But I'll save my other points for when we kind of get into the quarter. We have to talk a little bit about the quarterback situation later. But as
yeah,
far as the other free agents go, I I guess some of the other big names that are free agents would be like Levi Wallace, who's been around for 2 years, has been a starter at times. Montravius Adams,
Yeah.
on the defensive line, he's been a starter at times. But again, I mean, both of these guys feel expendable. Levi Wallace was benched at points last year.
Yeah.
Montravius Adams, I mean, he's getting up there in age, and it's also the fact that the Steelers have Keanu Benton, who I think they like a lot. That's kind of also the same sort of position. So again, I don't really see those guys as being important players to bring back. Same thing with Marcus Golden, a guy that got reps last year, but really wasn't fully in the road. The Steelers just seem to like refuse. They want TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith out on the field as much as possible. And while I think it'd be beneficial for both of them to have more of a rotation, I just don't think Marcus Golden is worth bringing back when you've also got Nick Herbig, who they drafted last year and looked solid at times in play last year. So again, none of these guys I'm desperate to have back. Now I will say two free agents that would be, I don't want to say a luxury, but it would be nice to have them back is Miles Killebrew and Miles Boykin. Both of them special teams aces. Miles Killebrew's been the captain of that special teams. I would really like to see Killebrew come back, and honestly, if they could get Miles Boykin back at the right price too, he's a very good gunner. So I would like to see both of those two guys come back. Those would honestly, if I'm being completely honest, are probably my 2 and 3 as far as guys I want re-signed for next offseason or this offseason.
Yeah, special teams, man. I mean, it's an important part of the game too. It's even though it's kind of forgotten at times. Those two, I mean, yeah, it's special team. I mean, Killebrew, was he the captain?
He was the captain, yeah, and I think he's been the special teams captain for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, so you definitely got to re-sign him. You got to find a way. But also, I just saw this that Schefter tweeted that the Steelers have released Keanu Neal with the designation of failed physical, if that means anything to you.
Interesting.
But yeah, that just
Interesting.
happened.
I mean, he was a name that I didn't bring up as far as cap casualties because he wasn't owed that much. Let me pull it back up here. What his cap hit was going to be. I mean, that's interesting. He failed. What was it? A failed physical?
Yeah.
That is strange. I don't know. He was dealing with an injury at some point this year, but I don't know what the significance of that would be. But I mean, so that kind of tells me maybe they're gonna really try to keep DeMonte Casey. Remember, Keanu Neal was signed last offseason. This may already be updated without him on this. I'm looking at Spotrac's salary table for the Steelers, and I don't see Neal on it anymore.
Was it that fast? They already that's kind of crazy that he's not even there. Like this Schefter.
Wow, they already have him under the dead cap. Yeah, so wow. I mean his dead cap hit's only 460,000, so literally nothing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out what he was supposed to be owed this year. I mean, the contract was only 2 years, about $4 million, so it wouldn't have been a lot. That's why I'm saying I didn't expect him to be a cap casualty, but whatever. If he failed this physical or whatnot, I mean, I guess he's gone, and maybe that puts a little bit. I mean, safety was already going to be a position I felt the Steelers needed to address, but now maybe even more so.
Yeah. Do you think they maybe try and keep Elijah Riley? Because I think he showed promise in preseason, right?
He has. I mean, I've always kind of had a soft spot for him because he was kind of a guy that they gave a shot at. I think they gave him a shot at training camp 2 years ago. Like, they signed him halfway through training camp, and he did enough to stay on the practice squad. And then last year, he was on and off the roster at times.
Yeah.
I could see it happening, but like, again, it would be probably a close to minimum salary.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean,
a couple other notable guys that have been around for a little bit that I think are probably gone is like James Pierre. I think is probably gone. Chandon Sullivan was only 1 season last year. I think he's probably gone. But honestly, other than that, I mean, the rest of the free agents were just guys that were signed to 1-year deals that either got hurt and that was kind of it, like a Quan Alexander, or like a Blake Martinez or a Michael Walker who was signed, halfway through the season. So again, I mean, low importance. If they brought back like a guy like Quan Alexander, so be it. But like, that's not really an answered inside linebacker either, especially coming off the injury.
Right. Exactly. I mean, for Quan Alexander, I mean, he did show some promise, but the injury obviously kind of derailed it all, and they were just so thin. I mean, they had to sign so many players off the street, it seemed like. during the
Yeah,
season. But I mean, yeah,
yeah.
it's just that was a tough one for Quan Alexander, but he's not coming back. That's
Yeah,
it's
exactly. I think it's kind of just done at this point. So I mean, really, the only three I want back is the only two I really want back is Rudolph and um Miles Killebrew. It's a
yeah.
luxury if they can bring back Boykin, and if they happen to bring back Levi Wallace or Montrevious Adams on a real cheap deal, like good. It may not even
Yeah.
be noteworthy at that point, you know?
Yeah, that's fair, and then just fill in the draft and low end free agents. So yeah, they're
Exactly.
expendable essentially, but yeah,
So let's flip things over to the Eagles now and talk a little bit about kind of their situation as far as some of their cap casualties because we've had two come just this week and just kind of any more that you could potentially see kind of happening.
yeah. So I mean, Kevin Byard was the most obvious one out of the two that have happened so far. I mean, he never really found his footing with the Eagles and didn't really play particularly well. And say what you want, yeah, it's at the time it seemed like it was a highway robbery again from Howie Roseman. It just didn't work out, and switching defensive coordinators didn't help, didn't do him any favors. So, I mean, yeah, his cap hit was what, like, well, it frees up 13 million. So, that's a good amount of cap space we can potentially use on some free agents that we may be targeting. But the surprising one out of the two, I mean, Avonte Maddox. I mean, I say surprising because I just assumed he was going to stay on the roster and be the slot corner. But, thinking about it, I was like the last 2 seasons he's been banged up. And I mean, he missed most of this past season anyway with like some foot injury. I can't remember. Liz Frank, I think it was a fracture. Um, and then the season before, again, just injuries. He was just never on the field. So, and we gave him
Yeah.
an extension a couple seasons ago. I can't remember these. I think it was about 3 years. So maybe after this year he was a free agent, but it frees up 9 million in cap space. And the interesting thing is, there's still like interest. There's mutual interest in him returning. So I would like to see him back. And I mean, we've seen this before with players with kind of high cap hits going into the season. Fletcher Cox at one point was cut. I think it was the season ago, last off season. They brought him back for a cheaper deal. This isn't uncommon, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's back on the roster. But a part of me is like, maybe he just needs a fresh start because, yeah, like I said, he's been dealing with so many injuries, and he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. And when you have younger corners like Keely Ringo and maybe Josh Joe, had some other practice squad guys you can maybe give an opportunity to, or even it is a pretty deep corner class too this year. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, and then there's also a handful of good free agent corners too. So I mean, it's remains to be seen which direction the Eagles go. But if you can get him at a reasonable price, then fine. I'm all for keeping him. I've always had a soft spot for him too because when he plays, he's one of the best slot corners in the league. But it feels
Now,
like ages ago that he's really played more than like 5 games in a row.
yeah. Now, do you know what his dead cap hit is after being cut?
Let me see. I'm gonna try and find it. I don't know off the top of my head. His dead cap hit is 7.7 million. It says.
Which that's pretty
Let's try.
significant.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, Kevin Byard's cap hit was 700,000. So
yeah, that's
I mean
nothing. Like,
I mean that just puts it in perspective that like the cap hit did hurt, even though it freed up 9 million in cap space ultimately. Um,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. I just didn't see this coming, but
yeah,
um, and I didn't realize this cap hit was that big because I looked through it like last week, and I don't remember Avonte Maddox's number being that high. But I mean, I guess it was. Maybe something changed in the last. I don't know because yeah, that was strange. But yeah, he's a free agent. Maybe we bring him back. But
yeah,
that again was surprising. But now, as with regards to other potential cap casualties, I mean, I've been saying James Bradbury potentially, but you would have to designate him as a post June 1st cut because I
mhm,
think you would save four. So what was it? 4.8 million cap hit. Cutting him post June 1st would free up 4.7 million. And plus, he just looked awful last year. So clearly took a step back. And I mean, the number of times he got burned by, I mean, I don't even know, just players in general. I mean, a bad look. And plus, you have Keely Ringo in the wing. He showed promise too, even though he's a fifth rounder. But I mean, you might want to develop him a bit faster, a bit sooner. And again, like I said, free agent corner is looking pretty solid and draft class as well. So I don't really
Yeah,
see the need to bring Bradbury back, especially when you have Darius Slay on the other side. You probably want to get faster, like on the defensive side of the ball anyway, because I mean, with some of the players being on the older side, it just seemed like this past season they were a step too slow. Um,
yeah.
so
Well, and I
getting
mean,
younger there.
I feel like this kind of gets into a little bit of that report that you sent me yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, that the Eagles had a little bit of regret that they let CJ Gardner Johnson go rather than,
Yeah,
obviously they chose to bring back James Bradbury and Darius Slay over someone like CJ Gardner Johnson, which, it's not like CJ Gardner Johnson had a great year with the Lions, but again, younger, a step quicker. And now, I mean, James Bradbury was definitely the name on this list that kind of stuck out to me too of potential cap casualties.
yeah. Now that report was interesting. I was like, because I texted you, I was like, why would he want to come back after he felt like he didn't get offered the amount of money he felt he deserved? Um, and ultimately took that 1 year deal with the Lions, and like you said, didn't have the best season exactly. He was kind of injured here and there, but I just don't like. I'm all for it. I would love to bring him back because I mean, just the swagger he plays with, this kind of um confidence he plays. It just not, I don't want to say a tone setter, but it just brings a certain um personality into the like, I feel like that the secondary especially lacked and missed dearly last year. But I just don't think that's gonna happen. I would love for him to come back maybe, but um it just to me it's like I don't know why he would it's like getting back together with your ex. It's just like it's kind of done. Once it's done, it's done. It's like I don't know why you're gonna go back to it. And I say that from a personal stand. I've experienced that. But anyway, that's a different topic. Um but yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens on that. I feel like they're also just better. I mean, the safety free agents are crazy. We'll get into that later. The number of safeties that have been cut and that are available on the market. But the other thing I'll say, Hassan Reddick, you got to restructure his deal. You got to give him another. I mean, I harped on this last
That was the
episode.
last thing I was going to bring up to you is like something's got to be done about Reddick's contract.
I know, like you can't just let him walk after this year because he's still productive. And in your best edge rusher, Josh Sweat's definitely second, but still, you don't want to. I don't think they're going to trade him, but still, I would rather put that money on the back end and give him like bonuses or whatever and incentives for this season, free up cap space because we do need help, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I mean, you just figure out a way, Howie. I mean, you have time, but it'd be nicer to get it done, sooner rather than later. But again, we will see what happens with that. Um,
Yeah, we will see what happens with that. And yeah, it seems like either some form of an extension or a restructure is necessary, and hopefully it doesn't. A trade isn't the option they have to go with.
yeah, that would be worst case scenario. But
So let's
in
get
terms,
into the Eagles
yeah,
free agents a little bit.
yeah. So, man, um, this is interesting because there are definitely a few like more high end, I guess, free agents than the Steelers. Um, See, I have a list of all of them, and I'm trying to figure out which ones are priority. Um, Gee, I mean Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, who knows? Those two are. I don't know if they're going to retire or what, but like,
Yeah, the thing with Fletcher Cox is interesting too. Is like you've heard things that like maybe he wants to go somewhere else, even though he's been with the Eagles forever. Um, and
yeah,
like I feel like I remember, maybe I dreamt this, but I feel like I remember seeing a report that he said that he wanted to play with Cam Hayward for a season.
I think I saw that too at some point. Yeah,
Right?
I did see that. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I forget when that came out, but it did exist. It did come out at
Okay.
some point.
Yeah.
So you're not dreaming that.
Okay. Yeah.
um, but those two, I mean, Brandon Graham probably the. I mean, I don't know. It really depends on what they want to do. And
Yeah.
they've been with Philly their whole careers, so I don't think it makes sense for them to leave anyway. But those are kind of just you kind of if they don't retire, you probably assume they come back for another season and just end their career in Philly. See now, DeAndre Swift is probably up there, but we're going through this again. Miles Sanders was a free agent after this, past off season or this past season, or sorry, the season before, I should say.
Yeah.
And we didn't re-sign him because Howie Roseman doesn't really prioritize running backs. So Swift had a pretty good season. It's just he was underutilized at many points this season for whatever reason, but he had career highs in a lot of stats, but still, I mean, he's an explosive runner still. He's still got some juice. Like he's not like old necessarily either, but I would and he's from Philly also, so it would be nice to bring him back. I just don't think it's gonna happen unless you bring him on like a cheap deal. I just don't see it
Which
happening.
is very possible. I mean, the running back class is stacked this year.
That's true, but again, Howie Roseman's not really known for drafting. Well, I mean, later rounds maybe yes, but
No, I'm talking more the free agent class. I'm sorry.
oh,
Excuse
free
me.
agents. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I was
There's a
gonna say.
lot of running backs who have, tried to play their luck as far as holding out to get big money. And all of a sudden now we're seeing a lot of guys that were recently on the franchise tag, like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs or Tony Pollard, all getting to test free agency now.
You know what's really interesting? Saquon being linked to the Eagles. Cowboys wasn't very surprising. I don't know. They're just the Cowboys, so who wouldn't want to go there because they're kind of actually I don't know. Maybe it was surprised, but it's also division rival. But linking him to the Eagles, I'm like, not that I don't want. He's obviously still a good player. I'm just worried about injury history, and then you have the likes of Boston Scott, who's a free agent too, and you're kind of thin at the position. Really, the only one you have right now is Kenny Gainwell. So,
Yeah.
what happens then? It's going to have to be addressed. But it also, the bringing in Kellen Moore is definitely a huge part because you got to figure out like what you want in your running back, what you want them to do, and it seems like more kind of receiving backs. And I don't think DeAndre Swift is quite that. It's not that he can't do it. It's just his style is more like one cut running, like kind of outside zone. I don't know. It's just not quite. I don't think it will suit Kellen Moore's offense. So that's
Yeah.
another reason I don't think he'll come back. But I would probably prioritize him. Um, Braden Mann. I mean, I'm saying this about a punter. He was he was a top 10 punter in a lot of stats, and special teams also was really good. The best unit all season for the Eagles. So you probably should bring him back. I mean, and especially after the whole Aaron Cepas,
Nightmare.
debacle that was. Yeah, that was terrible. But he should be. I'm. There's so many free agents, dude. That's the other scary part. That like, I know who I don't want to resign: Marcus Mariota, Julio Jones, Quez Watkins is not. I would rather keep Alameda Zaccheaus over Quez Watkins because he's just a better player, and also just it's better receiving anyway. Bradley Roby's not a priority. Justin Evans, I mean, hardly played, got benched, only filled in for injury. Zach Cunningham, maybe as the line, like you could bring him back because Nakobe Dean's really the only one there. Shaq Leonard, I mean, he's just washed. He's old. I'm sorry. I feel bad for him, but he's just not him anymore. But
Tell me if you disagree with this. I feel like this is kind of what I said about like Montravius Adams and Levi Wallace of like a lot of these guys that are free agents, you'd bring them back as like depth pieces.
yeah,
And if they bring them back, it's got to be for cheap money. And you just kind of like, all right, they did that. You're
yeah.
not excited about it necessarily. Like it's not filling, a hole or a gap on the roster. It's a depth re-sign.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's I said they were top end, but really there's not. It's just a bunch of fill-in guys, and it really was DeAndre Swift, and I would bring back Sua Peta as a backup because he is good as a backup guard.
You
That
prefer him
he's
over Jack Driscoll?
so that's the I think Jack Driscoll is going to get paid somewhere else. Not like huge money, but I think he's going to want to start somewhere else. Um, but I would like to bring him back because he is versatile. You can play at tackle and guard, and Suapeta probably more suited for a left or right guard anyway. I don't know. It's one of the two or both because I mean, the Eagles always build from the trenches anyway, so it has to be one of the two. I would be fine with either really, but um, again, it's not like the Eagles have a lot of free agents to prioritize and resign, but it's definitely a lot of roster spots you have to fill in, considering Jason Kelce retired too, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And the defensive side needs to get younger, so um, a lot of these defensive players just were signed for a 1 year deal,
Yeah.
and just weren't good enough anyway. So I mean, Morrow was only good against the run, so I don't know, man. It's just a handful of guys who just shouldn't be re-signed anyway.
So give me like your top 3 to 5 that you like want back. And it could be the same thing as me where it's like you've got, two that you really want back and like two or three that it's like, oh, it'd be cool or nice to have them back.
Okay, so top three: Sua Peta, Jack Driscoll, one of those two, if not both. Um, Braden Mann. I mean, Rick Lovato's a long snapper. He's gonna get re-signed. That's a given. He's been with the Eagles his entire career. And then I guess I would say DeAndre Swift as number three. And it kind of goes without saying that Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham will be back if they don't retire. And maybe I'm just being arrogant about that too, but
I think that's definitely the case for Brandon Graham. It wouldn't shock me if Fletcher Cox kind of tested his options a little bit.
maybe, yeah. But yeah, that's really about it, man. Like
Yeah.
it's not a very encouraging I mean, again, a lot of these free agents just didn't perform, and we're just 1 year stopgap sort of
Yeah.
players.
It's
So
interesting because I remember going through this last year, and I feel like each of us had like 5 to 7 that we would really be cool having them back. And this year it's
yeah,
like, all right, there's one or two guys for each team, and that we're kind of good from there.
and also I just pointed out like two positions that weren't even that. I mean, punter, yeah, it's special teams. Long snapper, okay, fine, but it's not like impact position. It's not like those really crucial positions, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird, man. How the I did how much a year makes, how much a difference a year makes. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, that's what I'd say.
Well, let's jump into kind of talking about the state of the rosters right now and positions that we could see addressed. And if we have a couple of names in mind that are free agents, let's go through this portion of the free agency preview so we can flip back over to the Steelers.
Yeah,
Some of the positions, I'll start with the offense that I think could be addressed. Like I said, I think that they're cutting Allen Robinson, so it wouldn't shock me if they go and try and bring in another wide receiver, maybe more of your prototypical, outside wide receiver. I could see that being addressed. Obviously, center is now a big need. I think that's definitely going to be an area that's going to be addressed this offseason, whether it's through free agency or the draft. Left tackle is interesting. I mean, I think they're
right.
going to move Broderick Jones over there. I think Omar Khan said as much that like the plan is for him to play left tackle.
Yep.
So the next stage is, well, what do you do at right tackle? Is it Dan Moore? Is it someone else? Do you address it through the draft? Do you address it through free agency? So I think that's an interesting position to look at. And then obviously the one that I'll spend a little bit of time on here is, what are you doing at quarterback outside of Kenny Pickett? I've talked in volume about Mason Rudolph. I think the other kind of option, if you don't get Rudolph back, would be Ryan Tannehill as a veteran that's had success with Arthur Smith.
Yep.
At that point, I think you're a little bit more handing the job to Kenny Pickett versus a competition. I can also see them adding some depth with a guy like Jacoby Brissett. Maybe like a Gardner Minshew that's just kind of a veteran depth piece. That is maybe a step up from what you had in Mitch Trubisky last year. Or I think you address it with a around 2 to 5 pick somewhere and take a chance on a quarterback.
Right.
So, I also see them potentially adding another tight end because I've talked before how much Arthur Smith loves using tight ends in his offensive system. So it wouldn't shock me even with, I think they've got 4 on the roster right now. If they brought in another name, someone that I've heard that I wouldn't be shocked is Jonnu Smith, because he was with
Yeah.
Arthur Smith in Tennessee and in Atlanta. So it wouldn't shock me if the Steelers brought him in just as a little bit of a prediction there. But on offense, that's kind of where I see the main points of emphasis being.
Yeah, I mean, quarterback is definitely the one that stands out. I mean, it has been for a couple years, a couple seasons now, but um, yeah, I mean, I certainly can see why Jonnu Smith could be a target or tight end, I guess, but um, yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, you have your running back set pretty much as your 1-2 punch.
Yeah, no doubt.
And then I think offensive line, yeah, certainly has to be, and that yeah, the right tackle position especially has to be, and center obviously, but um, I wonder which way the Steelers will go if they go, bring in someone else for right tackle, or which if do they prioritize center over right tackle, like kind of which direction they go there, because there are some notable, centers out there as opposed to
Yeah.
like tackles, but I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
Lloyd
interesting.
Cushenberry. I mean, Mitch Morse was just cut. Connor Williams. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just those are a couple names that are no joke. I mean, I think Tyler Biotish from Dallas is also a free agent. So there's some names at center, but there's also, I mean, it's a good class for center in the drafts as well. I guess kind of the last thing I'll say as far as the offense too is if there's one big name, I'm not going to rule out as far as the Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, as far as that whole grouping goes, the name that it wouldn't shock me is Russell Wilson.
No, I don't want.
I don't know
I
if there's
don't want to
links
say
there, man.
that.
I don't know if there's links, but if you could bring him in on a deal for like 1 year and have it be a cheap deal, it wouldn't shock me if they pulled the strings on it. And I think that Russell Wilson himself needs to go to a franchise that's incredibly stable, doesn't put a huge emphasis on the quarterback. That's the name that wouldn't shock me if they were to bring in any of those guys. I'm not saying they're going to do it, but of
Right.
those, 4 to 5 guys, that's the name that to me would seem like the most likely fit.
I mean, potentially too. I mean, yeah, because in the days, in Seattle when they had Marshawn Lynch and it was kind of built on the run game a bit, so it wasn't necessarily Russell Wilson having to throw like 40 passes every single game. So, I mean, maybe going back to something familiar, like, kind of
Yeah.
a run first offense could probably suit him. I don't know. It's weird to say I have questions about his like how he goes about, his everyday sort of thing. It's kind of I don't want to say cliche, but it's also just like it seems like he's very to himself sort of thing. Not that he's full of himself, but
No,
very
I get
just
that. I feel like we heard reports about that when it was like he requested his own sort of like changing room or area in the locker room, and like he
yeah,
had some of his
exactly.
own like personal trainers and stuff that were around all the time. I mean, that
Yeah.
could definitely be a turnoff to a lot of guys in the locker room. But I don't know, man. I mean, if he comes in and he kind of humbles himself a little bit, again, that's a big ask too. He's got to come in and recognize like he's got stuff to prove, and I'm just saying that's the name that I could see being the fit. I don't see the Steelers going out and giving Kirk Cousins big money. I don't see
No.
them trading for Justin Fields. But if Russell Wilson was willing to come in on like a 1 year, $5 million deal with incentives up to like 10 million, I could see the Steelers pulling the trigger on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally opposed to it, but I mean, I guess it's an upgrade over Mason Rudolph, maybe.
And again,
I
that's
mean,
kind of the question of it's like, is that something that you'd consider over Mason Rudolph, or is that another option if Mason Rudolph doesn't come back?
I
So
think you would probably not have Rudolph back at that point. I don't know.
yeah,
I
no,
just
yeah,
don't.
and that's what I'm saying is it's like I still see them prioritizing Rudolph over someone like
Oh
Wilson,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
if they miss out on Rudolph, would they then try to dip into that group of 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are a
Right.
little bit of bigger names?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I get what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and again, I don't know, just of rumblings I've heard and people talking about the different fits of some of these guys, he's the one that just kind of I see it making more sense than a Justin Fields or or
I
a
actually
or
agree.
a Baker Mayfield. Um,
Yeah.
so I'll move over to the defense now. As far as position, I mean, it feels like it's been, even though they drafted Keanu Benton last year, it feels like the Steelers have been waiting to like use that big early, pick on another defensive lineman. And with Cam Hayward continuing to get older, I mean, I think it definitely becomes a little bit more apparent that that's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Steelers, and I feel like Tomlin and Khan have kind of alluded to this, but how quickly their depth got shredded at inside linebacker last year, even
Yeah.
though Landon Roberts is still there and Cole Holcomb is expected to make a full recovery. Like, I think that they're going to invest in the inside linebacker position. It might be both in the draft and in free agency. And then the other position, I mean, the secondary, I think is going to need some work. I mean, especially now that you had that report that Keanu Neal is being cut.
Yeah.
They need to pair someone alongside Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, they tried to do kind of the 3 safety tandem last year, but I even if it's just someone that's a solid player, Terrell Edmonds, say what you will about him, it didn't work out in Philadelphia. He didn't do much in Tennessee, but he was a very solid player that you could count on to do his job week in and week out alongside Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think that's kind of the better option to look to kind of fill that void. And then I think obviously you want to kind of bring in someone to be that corner opposite, Joey Porter Jr., whether that's the draft or if you kind of invest in a free agent that's a little bit younger than Patrick Peterson. But those are kind of the positions I see needing to be addressed this offseason on the defense.
Yeah, I mean, L'Jarius Sneed, I know he just got franchise tagged, but I mean, the Chiefs, I saw a report saying that they could be asking for like a second, and then that's it. Like no less than a second round, I should say. But I don't know if that would be some because it seems like Khan's a bit more aggressive than his predecessor. So I forget what was his name again.
Kevin Colbert, yeah.
Yeah, Colbert. He's a bit more. It seems, yeah, just a bit more aggressive. I'm not gonna say he's gonna do that, but that would be. I mean, that would be quite the tandem if you had Snead and Joey Porter Jr. as your starting corner. But I mean, safety definitely. I mean, at some part of the secondary needs to be addressed. I mean, Terrell Edmonds, yeah, that's probably. I mean, yeah, a safe option and probably the cheapest. Well, at least one of the cheaper options at safety to fill in alongside. And plus, they're like you said, they played alongside each other anyway, so familiarity wouldn't hurt necessarily.
I'm kind of just, what you bring up there about Omar Khan and his style, like he is not afraid to make a splash and spend money. I mean, you look at the way that he kind of brought in Isaac Seumalo when no one was expecting it last year. I'm kind of looking at that as something that could be, a route that he goes. The thing is, because it feels like corner, as far as free agents go, is a bit more thin than safety this year. I think
Yeah,
there's more options on the free agent market for the safety position than the corner market. A guy that I wouldn't mind, them going after at the safety position is Xavier McKinney, who wasn't tagged by the Giants. I think
yeah,
that could potentially be a fit. He's young. He's still only 25. And again, it's like he's probably going to warrant some money, but I mean, again, it's a splash that I don't think a lot of people would see coming. I know that the Steelers were linked to Jalen Johnson as far as corners were going before he
right.
got tagged, but if it's making a trade for a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, I mean, you said what, a second round pick is what they're asking for, a second round pick plus.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, dude, he only allowed like 1 touchdown last year. Like he played out of his mind. I mean, I would love that. And you really do need another player across from Joey Porter Jr. And, I don't know if that's necessarily the answer, but I think that they're going to look to add somebody. So I do think it's probably more likely they go. I think they're going to definitely add to the secondary and free agency. I think that's the thing that I'll kind of say with this.
yeah,
And like I said, I think they're going to go free agent for, inside linebacker and, and they'll also go to the draft, a mid-round pick in the draft on maybe an inside linebacker. I mean, there's some kind of bigger names as far as inside linebackers go this year that are free agents as well, dude. I mean, I'm just looking at the list right now. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are players.
yeah.
Patrick Queen, Jordan Brooks,
Devin White is one of
Devin
them.
White, Drew Tranquil. I mean, there's some
Yeah,
names out there that are players that are no joke. That you pair someone that can play in coverage a little bit alongside of Landon Roberts. Then you get Cole Holcomb back from his injury as well. All of a sudden, you have a pretty good inside linebacker group. And I think the inside linebacker is a position that it was devalued a little bit the last couple of years. And now I think you're starting to see some of these top teams that have really good coverage inside linebackers like Fred
yeah.
Warner in San Francisco.
Mhm.
there's a value to having somebody that can play well at the inside linebacker position. So maybe the Steelers value that a little bit and invest there. So I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of what I see for the defense. And yeah, we'll have to see how everything kind of shakes out in free agency, what positions they decide to address.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say that linebacker was devalued. I mean, there's no greater example than the Eagles. I don't know if we should transition there to the Eagles
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah, we could transition to the Eagles, but that's a great. I mean, that's a great point, dude. I mean, they had a lot of really good linebackers and the inside the year that they made their run to the Super Bowl, and last year they just kind of were trying to patchwork it or find a whole bunch of different guys that could potentially make it work, and nothing ever really hit to the level they had 2 years ago.
yeah. So I mean, that's clear. I mean, I think there are more glaring needs on the defensive side of the ball, and I mean, linebacker certainly that one that has been devalued as we've been talking about, and you pretty much listed all of these names that I had on my list too. But I think more realistic is either Devin White or I don't know. Well, you didn't say this one, but Andrew Van Ginkel because he played with Fangio last year, so he's already
Yeah.
familiar with the system. And familiarity would certainly help, at least at the linebacker position. So maybe that's a potential target there, but a linebacker has to be addressed because, I mean, just based off of Nakobe Dean's track record, he's not really going to be on the field the whole season. He's just been injured at several points throughout his last 2 seasons, and it's a shame. I really was I'm not saying his time's over, but
Yeah.
we're getting to that point where it's
You
like
can't count on him to give you consistent snaps at this point. And I mean, the only other
exactly.
guys you have on the roster that play on the inside is Ben Van Sumeren and Brandon Smith, who I don't even know who he is.
I don't even know who he is, but Van Summerman, he was promising, but he's probably more of a special teamer anyway. So you got to
100%.
feel it in the draft and in free agency. But um, man, I mean, safety is certainly a position that has to be addressed too. Because I mean, like I said, Kevin Byard was kind of a disaster. Justin Evans sucked, didn't really play anyway. Um, and I mean, Sidney Brown's also going to be out. I mean, I don't know. He might start on the pup list, physically unable to perform lists to start the season. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it would be nice to get someone more experienced to pair alongside Reed Blankenship. And the name that just got cut today, Justin Simmons,
Yep. I
could
was going to bring him
potentially be
up.
there. And also, he was with Fangio for a few seasons. So, again, familiarity, man. Like you can't tell me that that's not a possibility.
I'd be
Um,
surprised. I mean, like, honestly, like, I almost think that that's like a match made in heaven right there.
that's what I'm saying. I was like, it's either him or Eddie Jackson, who also who played under Fangio and had his 2 best seasons cut by the Bears a few weeks ago. I mean, that could be another name. It's one of those 2 players because, like I said, they played in the system, and Simmons specifically has openly praised Fangio for his defensive scheme and then just the way he goes about coaching. So I mean, that just to me, yeah, like you said, it seems like a match made in heaven. So, but it has to be one of those two because I don't think you're going to get one of those higher end. And plus, the 2 other players I had in mind, Antoine Winfield, Kyle Duggar, were
Yeah.
franchise tagged. So those two
I
kind
mean,
of
and
cross off
and
the
CJ
list.
Gardner Johnson's a free agent, man. So I mean,
Yeah,
if
if
the
it
Eagles
comes to
really
it,
want him back, I mean, we talked about this early on in the show. I mean, he'll be available.
yeah, maybe. And then I don't know, man. Well, we'll see about that. That's probably like worst case, or maybe worst case is Chuck Clark, who was traded from the Ravens to the Jets last offseason. The Eagles were targeting him, and then he got injured. I think it was a torn ACL or something like that. But
What
maybe
about either of the safeties up in Buffalo? I mean, Micah Hyde's a free agent. Jordan Poyer was just cut. I mean, both of those guys are up there in age. You see either of those
I
as a
was
potential fit?
see that's what I had to, but I'm like, again, you're trying to get younger a bit.
Yeah.
Like not saying that they're bad players. Like they have tons of experience. They know how to play a position, but again, it's kind of going against what I think the philosophy should be of getting younger and quicker. So I don't think either of those two really would make sense because of their age, but I don't know. I'm not going to rule that out. That's certainly a possibility too. But Safety, line inside. I mean, linebacker. Yeah, for sure. Priorities. Where else do we go with this?
Well, let me
Because
ask you this, because Fangio
yeah.
is going to come in and play a little bit more of a 3-4 style defense. Do you see them adding like a sort of like a more versatile defensive end, perhaps?
Ooh, the more okay. That's interesting. I'm not sure they probably could. I just don't. I didn't like look at any specific players to target, and I don't think
Yeah,
like say there's no way they would go out and get like a Christian Wilkins. Like that would be absurd. But
yeah,
plus they already have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. I'm not. It's I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Um, I'd have to get back to you on that, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised, at least for depth, having a more
yeah. I mean,
versatile.
I'm even talking. It could be someone along the lines of like a Bryce Huff, who's a free agent from the Jets.
I think he
Someone
might
that is
get paid a significant amount.
you think he's going to get paid?
Like, yeah, I don't think the Eagles would
Yeah,
pay him, like top 15 money or something like because they already have, the likes of Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. So I don't know. Man, it's just I think they could add someone theoretically on the like edge, like more versatile role. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could even do that with Brandon Graham, but he's not going to give you a whole lot of snaps generally because he's
yeah,
done it before, playing sort
yeah,
of that lining up a defensive tackle and edge. And I don't know. It's interesting for sure. Running back
yeah.
has to be
Just
priority.
something I was thinking about. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. No, it's totally valid. I guess I'll move to the offensive side. Uh, I said running back earlier, but again, I like the class is deep. Like free agent class, yeah, it's deep. I mean, you have the likes of Derrick Henry, who also has been linked to Dallas. I would hate that, but
everybody's been linked to Dallas. I mean, Dallas is going to
yeah,
sign one of these running backs, especially if they let Tony Pollard go and don't try to bring him back. Dallas is going to
yeah,
get. I mean, I'll say this pretty confidently that Dallas will get one of Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, or Josh Jacobs.
yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, but I mean, I think the Eagles have to. This goes against everything Howie Roseman does. I'm just like you have to invest in like a true lead back. And again, I'm not discrediting DeAndre Swift, but he's not exactly that guy that's going to give you like 20 carries or consistently, 25 carries consistently every game. I mean, that only happened in the first half of the season, really. Um, I don't know if they're going to do it though. I just don't think Howie Roseman values it that much. And with the investment, I think they're going to make on the defensive side. I think they're just going to use another running back by committee, or I don't know. Maybe you bring in Austin Eckler, even though he was kind of banged up, and plus he was with Kellen Warren in LA. So I don't know.
That's true. I mean, that's also. I mean, Kellen Moore was there for. Was he only? I think he was only in LA for one season. I mean, it's not like you really got to use Eckler a lot, but
Yeah, exactly. So and he was banged up, so I like
yeah,
didn't get the full. I don't know if you want a veteran guy, maybe you bring in Eckler, and again, I think he fits Kellen Moore's system a bit more than DeAndre Swift would, but again, he's kind of up there in age, so I'm not sure, man. Like that's probably priority on the offensive side. Receiver, I mean, you already have AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I mean, the third wide receiver, I think Zacchaeus is fine as that number three. And I mean, I think the other real priority, I guess, would have to be backup QB because Marcus Mariota, as I said, the entire season couldn't complete a pass to save his life. Then he's more of a running guy anyway. So that certainly, I mean, it's goes without saying how important the backup position is. So that you certainly have to address. I'm not sure I don't think you're going to bring in the likes of Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I think Sam Darnold is also Drew Lock, Jacoby Brissett. Those some guys that are probably be back. I mean, yeah, probably be backup somewhere. But you can't bring Mariota back. That's all I know really. Because
maybe a
again,
guy like Tyrod Taylor. I mean,
potentially
just across Jersey and in with the Giants.
he could do that. It's not like he had much. I mean, and he did light up the Eagles that one game, but
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's desperately trying to be a starter again, and I mean, like I just don't think that there's enough openings for him to be a starter somewhere. So, I mean, the next
Yeah,
option would be a backup in a system that, he's got somewhat of a similar skill set to Jalen Hurts, um, as far as his running game goes. But yeah, I get what you're saying. You need a legitimate backup quarterback. Maybe a reunion with Gardner Minshew from what you had 2 years ago.
I would not be opposed to that too. I honestly, yeah, well, I'm okay. I'd be okay with that. It's definitely better than Mariota. That's as much as I'll say. But so priority, I guess, has to be safety, linebacker, backup quarterback. You could make the argument for offensive line, but I think that'll be more of a draft day sort of thing. I don't think they're gonna
Well,
try
I
to
was
get.
going to ask you. I mean, you have a pretty gaping, and maybe this can transition us into Jason Kelce, but you have a pretty
Yeah,
big hole at center now. I mean, are you addressing that in the draft, or are you potentially going out after one of these interior offensive linemen?
okay. So um, you have to sign one of Driscoll or Opeta, one of those two definitely. Um, and Opeta did a serviceable job at guard. You probably move Cam Jurgens to the center as he was
Okay,
originally drafted for to be Kelsey's kind of replacement
yeah,
successor. Um, and plus you have Tyler Steen who showed promise as a rookie this past season. So I don't think it's a dire need necessarily. Plus, Jeff Stoutland's the best offensive line coach in the league.
yeah,
So I would expect Steen to take a step up. I think it's more of a draft thing because, and the other thing with the Eagles is they always draft linemen like first 3 rounds.
yeah.
So that's what I expect them to do to kind of address it in the draft. Sure, they might sign someone like to back them up, but that's again, I think Steen will take enough of a step up to, you know, fight for that right guard position. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think you have your replacement already. And I don't know, maybe that's just me, but
That's fair.
it's
I mean, I don't think that's a terrible plan if you move Jurgens to center and have faith in him. You bring back either Driscoll or Opeta, and you have Steen, and maybe you bring in another guy in the first 3 rounds of the draft. All of a sudden, that's a pretty solid offensive line.
yeah, and it's
Again,
also younger, I guess, going that route too with
yeah,
at least Tyler Steen. Um, but maybe it should be more of a priority. I don't know. It'll be weird not seeing Kelsey playing anymore because I mean, obviously the retirement they officially announced. What was it? 2 days ago? Yeah,
yeah.
it was Tuesday. That press conference was I knew it was gonna be emotional, but I didn't think it was gonna be like that emotional. Like it was 40 minutes of just I mean, there were so many amazing quotes and so many amazing things he reflected on, and just the gratitude he showed for the city, Philadelphia, all his coaches, even from high school, and the coaches in the NFL, Chip Kelly, Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, Sirianni, all those guys. Like he at least thanked them and I mean, literally everyone that he could possibly think of, everyone inside the building in Philadelphia. It was just, I mean, the quote that stuck out to me, which I think I texted you, was that the last quote he said at the press conference was like, "Hungry dogs run faster." So that was the one that kind of almost like I was at work, kind of watching it on the side or listening to it on the side, and I was like, man, it's really hard not to like tear up right now because I mean, it's just the amount of work and talking about some of the lows he had in 2016, which was just a really bad season for him. Talking about how Jeff Stoutland was there for him and it was just like backing him up. Be talking to, I mean, I don't know if the Eagles were going to cut him necessarily, but there were talks that they were maybe going to replace him because he did so poorly. But Jeff Stoutland was there, backing him up the entire way, and it's just the development, man, from being a sixth round pick out of Ohio. Just his journey is unlike any other offensive lineman I've seen, and there have been some, really talented offensive linemen for sure, but just the figure, like him himself, Jason Kelce, the name. It's like it's such a in the last 2 years has grown like so much. I mean, sure because of Travis and their podcast they have and just all the I don't know, just off the field stuff he's done. But um, yeah, man, it's just it's gonna be an adjustment period for sure on the field, but um, I'm genuinely like happy for him that it's like he's acknowledged his time is done. Like he's just tired of it,
Yeah.
and but he's been so like humble about it. And it just seeing the emotion coming out of him is just like almost refreshing. I don't know to me, like seeing someone caring so deeply about the sport, about everyone who was with him along this journey is just like that's and the stuff he's done off the field has been, I mean, awesome. So just an idea, a really respected offensive lineman, a respected person, respected player. That it's just yeah. Certainly gonna miss him, but he's gonna be involved with Philly one way or another. So I mean, yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
Jason Kelsey. Congrats to him on a amazing career, and the Hall of Fame is where he's gonna end up. So
100%. And if he wants a career in media, he is such a captivating figure when he
yeah,
talks about the sport. And just honestly, as far as him in the public eye, we won't see him on the field anymore, but he's definitely not going away.
no, definitely not. And he'll still have his podcast with Travis Kelsey every Wednesday. But yeah, yeah, man, it'll be a big loss for the Eagles, but I love the man regardless. So
I think that's a good note to end on, man. We've touched everything on free agency. We've talked about the Steelers a little bit more in their quarterback situation, and obviously the big announcement of Jason Kelce retiring. So as we start to wrap things up, I'll ask you any final thoughts, anything else you want to touch on here?
um, these next 2 weeks or the next few weeks will be interesting, man. See what their teams decide to do, which direction they'll take.
Yeah, man. I think the Steelers are going to make a splash. I think they're going to they're going to make a splash like they did last year with Isaac Seumalo. They're going to get someone that nobody's talking about, nobody's expecting.
I hope so, man.
And we'll have something to talk about, and we'll see. The Eagles, I mean, they have holes to fill too. So we'll break it all down as it happens. So until next time, thank you, everybody. Peace out. Bye-bye.